She picked up the rifle the way you pick up a hand you have shaken 10,000 times. There was no fumbling, no searching for the controls, none of the small hesitations a person makes with an unfamiliar tool. Her right hand found the grip, her left settled the forend into the bag without being told where the bag was, and she folded down behind the glass in one motion that put her cheek on the comb at exactly the right height. A man at the firing point makes 100 tiny adjustments getting behind a rifle. She made none. She was simply there, built into it, the way water takes the shape of whatever holds it. I saw it from the tower, and the cold thread in my chest pulled tight. The team did not see it. They saw the canvas jacket and the resoled boots and the gray at her temple, and they were already grinning at the joke they had been promised. Carrick crouched beside her with the easy patience of a man explaining a card trick to a child. He started to tell her about the safety. She had already found it. He started to tell her about the scope. She was already looking through it, and her hands had already come off the rifle to dial the elevation turret, not guessing, not hunting, but counting clicks with the small, precise movements of someone reading a number she had calculated before she ever touched the gun. "Easy now," Carrick said, still grinning, still playing to the crowd. "It's got some kick. Just put it on the steel and squeeze. Don't worry about the wind, just—" "What's the dope on this gun?" she said. Not a question, the way she said it. A flat request for information, the tone a mechanic uses asking what's wrong with the engine. Carrick blinked. It's holding center at the 1,000. "No, it isn't," Della said. "It's printing about a 1/2 mil low and a quarter left, and it's been doing it all morning. You've been holding off to cover it." She was still looking through the scope downrange, and her voice had no edge in it at all. She was not accusing him. She was telling him the time. "Did you torque the rings yourself, or did somebody do it for you?" The grin came off Carrick's face the way frost comes off a windshield, not all at once, but in patches, until it is gone. Behind him the team had gone quiet in a way they had not been quiet all morning, because the paint girl had just said a sentence that no paint girl could possibly say, and they were all replaying Carrick's groups in their heads, the low left splash on the 1,000-yard berm, and arriving, one by one, at the realization that she was right. I keyed the loudspeaker without quite deciding to. "Firing point, range is hot, shooter has control. Carrick, your shooter's on the gun." My way of telling them this was a real string now and not a comedy bit, and that I was watching. Della did not wait for Carrick to answer about the rings. She had already moved on. Her eyes had come up off the scope and gone downrange to the flags, the 100, the 3, the 6, the 8, and she read them in that one unhurried sweep, and I watched her face do the arithmetic-watching thing, except now I understood it was not watching arithmetic. It was doing it. "What range do you want?" she said. Carrick was a beat slow. The crowd had turned on him without moving an inch. "The 8, he said. 800, the steel's already set." "The mile's set too," I said over the loudspeaker, because some devil in me wanted to see it. "Far lane, 1,600-yard plate. Della knows where it is, she said it Tuesday." The team's heads came around toward the tower glass, and then back to her, and the silence got a different texture. 1,600 yards is past where most of them could reliably go on their best day with their own rifles and a still afternoon. The wind was not still. It was the early afternoon Brechin wind, just starting to turn through the flats, doing one thing at the near flags and another at the far ones. Della looked at the far plate. It is hard to even see at that distance, a smudge of off-white against the brown berm. Then she looked back at the near flags, and the far flags, and something in her settled, the way a level settles when the bubble finds true. "Miles fine," she said. "I have watched 10,000 people get behind a rifle. I want to tell you what was different about her, because it is the whole thing, and if I cannot make you see it, then I have wasted your time. It was that she did not rush and she did not freeze. Those are the only two things most shooters do under pressure, and they are both forms of fear. The rusher wants it over. The freezer is afraid to commit. Della did neither. She built the shot the way a stonemason lays a wall, one true course at a time. No course laid until the one beneath it was right, and no hurry, because a wall built in a hurry falls down. First she fixed Carrick's rifle, because she was not going to shoot a gun that lied. She came off the gun, broke the bipod loose, and re-leveled the reticle against the far berm with the bubble level on the scope, and I saw her catch it, the cant he'd been shooting with all morning. A few degrees of tilt that nobody notices at the 8 but that walks your round a half mil low and a quarter left at distance. Exactly the fault I had seen from the tower and could not name. She squared it. She checked the turret 0 against the number on the gun's data card taped to the stock, found it disagreed with the cant she just corrected, and adjusted for it in her head without writing anything down. "Who shot this last?" she said quietly. "I did," Carrick said. His voice had lost the narrator in it. "You shoot well," Della said, and she meant it. There was no sting in it. "You've been shooting well on a gun that's been fighting you. That's harder than shooting well on a good one." She put her cheek back down on the comb. "It won't fight you after this." Then she went to work on the wind. This is the part the team could not look away from, because it was the part they thought belonged only to them. She read the near flags and the far flags and the mirage boiling up off the flats in the noon heat, and she did not call one wind, the way a club shooter does. She called 3, a value at the muzzle, a value at the middle, a value at the plate, and she weighted them, because wind near the gun matters less than wind in the middle of the flight, and she did all of it out loud in a low, even murmur that was not for them. That was just the sound of her thinking, the way an old carpenter mutters his measurements. Quartering off the left at the 3, maybe 4 miles an hour, picking up to 7 at the 6, it's fishtailing past the 8 there. See the 8 flag, it's hunting, so I'll favor the left edge and let the lull bring it home. She settled. "Splash my misses, Chief. I want to see where I'm wrong before I'm wrong twice." That was the line that did it, I think. Splash my misses. The humility of it and the total confidence of it in the same breath. A shooter so certain she would group that she was already planning how to correct a miss she did not expect to make. Carrick got down behind his spotting scope without a word. The chief of a SEAL detachment, glassing for the paint girl. Nobody laughed. Nobody had laughed in a while. The first round was a cold bore, and a cold bore at the mile is the hardest shot in the discipline, because the gun is not warmed in, the barrel is cold and shoots a hair different than it will once it's hot, and you get exactly one chance to be right with no data to correct from. Every real shooter at that firing point knew it. That is why they had gone so quiet. They were not waiting for the joke anymore. They were waiting to see something they did not believe they would see. She breathed. I watched her chest rise and fall and settle into the slow rhythm that the good ones find, and on the bottom of an exhale in the natural pause where the body goes still, the rifle fired. You wait at the mile. The round is in the air a long time, long enough that an inexperienced shooter loses faith and lifts his head. Della did not lift her head. She stayed in the gun, called her own shot the instant it broke, good, that's good, on for wind, and rode the recoil back down onto the plate to spot her own impact, the way only someone who has done it under pressure thinks to do. A full second and a half later, 1,600 yards downrange, the far plate rang. The sound came back to us thin and clear across the flats, a single bell note of steel, and behind my glass I felt the hair stand up on my arms. Cold bore. First round. The mile. In a fishtailing wind on a rifle she had just torn down and rebuilt that she had never fired before in her life. Nobody at the firing point made a sound. The appreciative low murmur that good shooters make for one another, the noise they had made for Carrick all morning, did not come. It was past that. You do not applaud a thing like that any more than you applaud the sunrise. You just go quiet in front of it. Carrick lifted his eye from the spotting scope. He looked at the plate, still faintly swinging on its chain a mile away, and then he looked at the woman lying behind his rifle, and I watched 20 years of certainty about who he was and who got to be good at this go out of his face. Do it again, somebody said. The kid, Ruiz. It came out of him almost pleading. The way you ask for a thing you are afraid was an accident, a fluke, a thing that cannot be real because if it is real then a great many of the things you believed are not. Della did not move off the gun. Hot barrel now, she said. It'll print a touch different, hold on. She made one small correction on the turret, not a guess, a known quantity, the difference between a cold barrel and a warm one, a number she carried in her body, and she read the flags again because the wind had nudged in the 90 seconds since her first round, and she favored a hair more left, and she broke a second shot on the bottom of a breath. The plate rang again. And then a third time, because Ruiz could not help himself and asked again. And the third time she called the lull before she fired it. Wait, wait now. Timing the gap in the fishtail so the round flew through the calm she had predicted 3 seconds before it arrived. And the plate rang a third time. And that was when it stopped being a question of whether she was good and became a question of who she was. 3 for 3, cold bore and too hot. The mile in a turning wind on a borrowed rifle she had repaired with her hands 2 minutes earlier. I have run that range for 26 years and I had never seen it done. I am not sure I had ever seen it done at all by anyone in person in the flesh. She came off the gun. She thumbed the safety, cleared the chamber, laid the rifle down on the bag exactly squared, the way you return a borrowed tool in better shape than you got it. And she started to get up to go back to her toolbox and the target carrier she'd been swapping, because as far as she was concerned the interruption was over and there was work to do. Wait, Carrick said. She waited. It was Carrick who pulled the first thread, but it was me who put the name to it, and I have to own that, because for a year I'd had every piece and never once assembled them. Where'd you learn that? Carrick said. He was not grinning. He was a man who has just watched something rearrange the furniture in his head and is trying to find the door. Nobody learns that. Nobody shoots a cold bore at the mile in this wind on a strange gun. That's not a skill you pick up painting steel. Della looked at him for a moment, and I think she weighed whether to answer at all, the way a person weighs whether to open a door they have kept shut on purpose. Then she said simply, I was a shooter, before. Before what? Before I wasn't, and she bent to pick up her wrench. But the kid, Ruiz, had his phone out, they always have their phones, and he'd been typing while the plate was still ringing, because something she'd said while she worked the wind had snagged in him. A phrase, a way of waiting the middle wind that he'd read somewhere, in some after-action account that every young sniper passes around like scripture. And his face changed, and he said, very quietly, the way you say a thing you are afraid to be wrong about. Slowwater. Della stopped with the wrench in her hand. That's you, Ruiz said. He was looking at his phone and then at her and then at his phone. Slowwater. The Velin Pass, the element on the ridge. 11 men walked out and there's a write-up, it's half redacted, but the distances are in it and the wind, and it's they teach the wind hold from it. We learned it. I learned it. He looked up at her with something close to fear. That's you, you're Slowwater. The firing point was so quiet, I could hear the far plate's chain ticking against itself in the breeze. I knew the name. Of course I knew the name. Anyone who has been around the long gun world for 26 years knows Slowwater. The way a sailor knows certain storms, not the person, the legend, the thing that happened on a ridge above a pass with a name nobody could pronounce, where an element got cut off and written off, command's own assessment, and one shooter on a far rock held the only ground that mattered and walked them out one round at a time across 2 days, at distances that did not make sense, in wind that should have made it impossible. Until 11 men who were supposed to die came home, the record was sealed. The distances that leaked out got argued about in every sniper school on the continent. Half the men said it was exaggerated. The other half taught the wind calls. And the shooter had separated quietly afterward. Medical, the rumor went. Something to do with the eyes or the back or the cost of 2 days alone on a rock. The body's bill always comes due and had vanished. And that was the end of it. a name and a ridge and a sealed file. I had been watching her paint targets for a year 3:35 p.m. Now I understand why it's a borrowed legend, and so should you. So I'll tell you why a shooter like that ends up on a range crew with a paint roller, because that turned out to be the truest part of the whole day. Della set the wrench back down. She did not stand up to make a speech. She was never going to make a speech. But she seemed to understand that the door was open now and there was no closing it, and that the kid had said her name with such naked respect that to wave it off would have been its own kind of unkindness. "They teach the hold," she said to Ruiz. "I'm glad it's useful. The write-up's mostly wrong about the rest of it." She said it without heat. It wasn't 11 shots and a legend. It was 2 days of being scared and tired and cold and doing the next correct thing over and over until the thing was done. That's all any of it ever is. The men who taught you that hold made it sound like magic because magic is easier to teach than patience. "Why are you here?" Carrick said. He gestured not unkindly now, just lost at the toolbox, the cart, the buckets of paint. "Why are you doing this?" And here is the part I have carried with me. The part that did the real work on the old certainty in my chest, more than any shot. "Because I'm good at it," Della said, "and because nobody out here needs me to be anybody." She looked downrange, past the flags, at the far plate still ticking on its chain. "I gave a long time to being the one they called when it couldn't be done. It costs more than the file says. After a while I wanted to do honest work where the steel doesn't care who I used to be, and at the end of the day I go home and I sleep. The range needed a hand who could read the wind and walk the impact area and not get killed doing it. Something almost like a smile. Turns out I was qualified." She was not bitter. That is what undid me. A lesser story would have made her bitter, would have had her relish the moment, would have given her a line to put Carrick in his place. She had no interest in his place. She had been the best in the world at the hardest thing, and she had set it down on purpose, and she painted steel because it was honest and quiet, and the steel did not need her to be a legend. The humility was not performance. It was the real article, the kind that only comes out the far side of having had every reason for pride and finding it weighed less than peace. I thought about the year I'd watched her stop at the flags a half-second too long, the brass she found that the detectors missed, the arithmetic-watching look. She had been reading my range better than anyone who ever shot it every single day, and she had never once said a word because she did not need us to know. "Chief," she said to Carrick, and nodded at his rifle on the bag, "re-zero it before your boys shoot it. I corrected the can't, but you'll want to confirm your come-ups now that it's honest. It'll surprise you how easy it shoots." She picked up her wrench a third time. "I've got a carrier to swap before the afternoon string." And she went back to work. I could end it there, and it would be a good story, and it would be true. But it is not where the day ended, and the rest is the part that put the whole thing past forgetting, so I will tell it. The detachment had the far lanes booked through the afternoon to finish their qualification before the quarters books closed at 1700. A hard deadline, the kind the Navy does not move for anyone. And it mattered, because a man who does not punch his card by close of quarter shoots it over from the start, and the detachment was deploying in 9 days and did not have a spare afternoon anywhere in those 9 days. They needed clean strings, all of them, by 5 o'clock. The weather had other plans. The Brechin wind, which had been a teacher's wind all morning, turned mean around 1500 as a front came down off the ridge, not dangerous, but switching hard and gusting, the kind of wind that turns a qualification into a coin flip. I watched from the tower as the detachment, one by one, started dropping rounds. Good shooters, all of them, suddenly fighting a range that had stopped making sense. Ruiz washed out his first string, then his second. The clock was eating them alive, and you could see the deployment pressure coming into the firing point, the thing that makes good men shoot worse, the wanting it too much. Carrick came up the tower stairs at 16:15. I had never had a SEAL chief climb my stairs to ask me anything in 26 years. He stood in the doorway of the control booth with his cover in his hand, and he said, "Master Sergeant." Can your crew shooter Candela call wind for my section? Through the close. I know it's not, I know that's not a thing. But my boys deploy in 9 days, and they need this card and the wind's beating them. And she reads this range better than any human being I've ever stood next to. I keyed the loudspeaker and asked her. She was up on the 400 line with her roller. She listened and looked at the sky and looked at the flags and said one word into the air loud enough for the tower mic to catch it. Coming. She did not shoot for them. I want to be clear about that because it would be the easy ending and it is not the true one. She did not pick up a rifle and run their qualification for them. That would have been the deus ex, the cavalry, the one woman fixing it with her own trigger finger. She would have refused it anyway. It was their card to earn. What she did was stand behind the firing line for the last 45 minutes of the quarter and read the wind out loud and teach them in real time to read it themselves. She did not give them numbers to dial. She showed them what she was looking at. See the 6 flag. When it lies down flat like that, that's your window. The gust spent itself. You've got about 4 seconds. Watch the mirage at the middle berm. It's running left to right. That's your real wind, not the flag at your feet. Stop trusting the flag at your feet. The flag at your feet is lying to you. The middle's where you live or die. And one by one, under her low, even voice, the section started to hit. Not because she shot for them, because she taught them to see the thing she saw in 45 minutes, the thing it had taken her a career and a ridge above a pass to learn. Ruiz cleaned his string at 1650 with her standing at his shoulder saying, "Wait, wait now." And when the last plate rang, he came up off the gun with tears in his eyes that he was not ashamed of, and the whole section punched their cards with 8 minutes on the clock. When the last string went cold and I called the range clear for the quarter, the detachment did a thing I have never seen before or since. Carrick formed them up. Not loosely, the way men stand around after a shoot. He formed them up in a rank on the firing line, all 6 and himself, facing not the targets but the woman in the canvas jacket who was already turning to go back to her cart, and her roller because as far as she was concerned the work was done. "Detachment," Carrick said. She stopped and turned around. "Attention." 7 men came to attention on my firing line, boots together, spines straight, and Chief Wade Carrick, who that morning had handed her his rifle as a joke and said your turn to make the whole line laugh, brought his hand up in a salute and held it, the way you hold a salute for something that has earned it and not 1 second less. "Slowwater," he said, "thank you." She looked at them for a long moment. I do not think she wanted it. I think a part of her had spent years making sure she would never be in a place where anyone would do this again. But she understood what it cost a man like Carrick to offer it, to stand his whole section at attention and salute the help in front of everyone, having been wrong out loud, and she would not refuse a thing that honest. She did not salute back. She is a civilian now. That is not hers to do any more, and she knew it. She did the thing a civilian who used to wear the uniform does. She came to attention herself, hands at her sides, chin level, and she held still and let them give it to her, and she gave them back the only thing she had, which was to receive it with the same gravity they offered it. Then Carrick brought his hand down, and the section relaxed, and Della Hook picked up her roller and her bucket and walked back down the line toward the 400 to finish freshening the white center on a steel popper before the light went, because the steel did not care who she used to be, and that was exactly why she loved it. I have run the line at Kell Flats for 26 years. I told you at the start that there was very little left that could surprise the man behind the glass, and I want you to know I have not said that sentence since. I think about her on the mornings the wind comes down off the Brechin Ridge cold and steady before it learns to lie. I think about all the days I watched her stop at the flags a half-second too long and never once wondered why. The best shooter I have ever seen or will ever see spent a year 15 feet behind the proudest shooters on this installation, and they called her the Paint Girl, and not one of us, not one, and I include myself first, ever thought to ask her name. We look right past the quiet ones. We have built a whole world around the idea that the loud ones at the firing point are the show, and the quiet ones with the buckets are the stagehands. And we are wrong. And we are wrong in a way that costs us. Because the loudest man on my range that morning was good, and the quietest woman on my range that morning was great, and the only difference anyone could see from the outside was a canvas jacket and a paint roller. Carrick's detachment deployed 9 days later. They all came home. I would like to tell you that was because of the wind she taught them in 45 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon, and maybe some small part of it was, and maybe it wasn't. I don't get to know. But I know this. Della Hook still works my range. She still paints the steel and walks the impact area and finds the brass the detectors miss. She still stops at the flags a half-second too long. And every man who has shot Kell flat since that day knows her name, and knows to listen when she speaks, and knows that the quiet hand with the bucket reading the wind behind the flags was reading it better than all of them, all along, every single day, and never needed them to know. She just needed the steel to ring true, and it did, and it does. That was always enough for her. It is, I have decided, enough for me.